right, it's about 11:02, so we'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our first live virtual Spotlight Art program. My name's Maggie. I'm one of the librarians here at the Plano Public Library, and I'm here to help facilitate the program with our artists, along with a couple of our support staff members, Rachel and Rachel, here to help. I want to go over a few background pieces of information. First, we do have you muted and your video blocked. You will only hear from me, our artist, and our other library staff members throughout the program. If you have a question regarding the program or a question for the artists throughout, please utilize the chat feature. You can see an icon at the bottom of your screen to open the chat. If you want to exit the full screen, there is an option at the top of your page so you can get to other things on your computer if you need to. In the email regarding the program, there is a link to a Google Drive with the files and information about this art program and art project we're going to be watching Christine do today. And speaking of Christine, I would like to welcome Christine Miller, our Spotlight Art artist. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you, Maggie. I'm so excited to be here with everybody today. Even though I can't see you, I know you're out there. And I am a retired Plano art teacher. I taught at Williams High School for 9 years and retired a couple of years ago. But I am also a lifelong fiber artist. And I want to especially tell the people attending that, you know, it can be in those really early years of life when you find something you just love. And that's how it worked out for me. When I was in grade school, I learned how to knit. And this will sound really weird, but it was true. I would go out at recess and I would stand up against the schoolhouse and I would knit at recess because I just didn't want to stop. And then I would do embroidery and I learned how to sew by the time I was in the 6th grade, and I did needlepoint. And so that love of yarn and thread and fiber started for me when I was really young. And then I just continued to learn throughout my life. I learned how to make baskets and I learned how to do felting, but it was when I was about 19 that I learned how to weave on a loom, a simple little loom. And that experience really changed my life. So I've been weaving now on a loom, which is kind of right over here. And I've been weaving for over 45 years. So I'm actually considered to be a master weaver. I've woven so many different kinds of things in my life, and it is my absolute favorite thing to do. And I do some really different kind of weaving, so I'm going to show that to you. But one thing I want to tell you is that what's really special about this week when we set this up is that this is the official spinning and weaving week. And so all of my spinner friends and my weaver friends and the companies and the organizations that we belong to are all celebrating weaving and spinning. And I just want you to think about cloth, how important it is in our lives. We literally have cloth all around us. We wear it. It's on our furniture. It's you know, on the floors and curtains and our bed covers. So sometimes we sort of take that cloth for granted and we don't think about it. But all cloth is either woven or knitted. And so I'm going to show you the weaving part of it. So I have another camera that we're going to use, and I'm going to come over to this loom and show you what I'm weaving right now. So this is called a floor loom, and it is, it's not super big, although you might see in the background, I have a loom back in the back of my studio. Oh, by the way, this is my studio. And this is one of the reasons we decided to have our program here, so you could actually see the space that I create my art in. So this is one of my favorite little looms, and I have some, a warp. The threads that go from the front to the back are called the warp. And I make towels that can be used in the kitchen. And I have to create these one thread at a time. And so I've already worked the loom. You can see that the threads go from the front to the back of the loom. And the treadles down at the bottom, when I press the treadle, it raises the harnesses. So come up here. And it raises the threads, and then I pass the shuttle through that opening. How's the audio? Is the audio okay, Maggie and Rachel?
It is, yes, we hear you great.
Great. So, and then I throw the shuttle back and forth. And I do this hundreds of times, literally. But when you get into the rhythm of it, it's very calming. And it's very, for me, it's kind of like a little meditation. And so it relaxes me, and I just get a lot of pleasure from seeing the fabric grow one pick at a time. Every time I throw the shuttle, it gets a little longer, and then I advance it. So on this loom, I have 10 yards of warp on, and when I get finished, I'll have about 11 towels from this warp. So this is regular cloth, but now I'm going to show you something that I weave that's really special, and not many people weave this way. And I'm gonna spin my bench. Keep so come over here, and so this loom is a little smaller. It's a little bit smaller than this loom. It's made by the same company. And one thing I do that's really special is I weave with wire on the warp instead of yarn. So Mr. Miller, you can kind of zoom in here and come in close and see this wire. So what I make with the wire is I make a woven metal fabric, and it works the same way. You know, I just lift the wires and I pull the yarn and the wire across and beat it into place. And but since this is going to be a sculpture material, it's not very wide. It's only about 2 inches wide. And I'm going to show you what I am going to make with this. It's special. So that is that. So I want you to spin around, and this is what I'm going to make with it. And I make sculpture. I make art. Come down to this. So this is my newest sculpture that I've made. There you go. And every bit of this sculpture is woven with wire and yarn. So the wire in the material allows me to shape it into the flowers, and I've got leaves And then down at the bottom, I have some little grass that has wire and yarn in it. And so this is what I make with it. So I love weaving with wire. It's actually also one of my, I like to weave with anything, but I've been weaving with wire for 25 years, and have made a lot. I've made baskets and jewelry and different kinds of sculptures as well. So that's a little bit about what I do with weaving. I think today, are we ready to start our lesson and our little activity today, you think, Maggie?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. All right, so I'm gonna put my,
Is that it? Is it over here? No, you had it.
yeah,
That's it.
this is it. All right, here's my hands. Okay,
Great.
all right. So this is a fiber project, and this project can be super simple for young children to make, but it actually could become its own art form. And I got the idea. I don't know how many of you have traveled. Maybe you've gone places and you've been a tourist and you wanted to keep a souvenir of where you went and what you saw. So these are badges that are commercially created, and they are actually embroidered by machines. So you've got all the yarn, and the thread is, and they use machines that have computers, and so they can actually draw out what they want, and then the machine will embroider that. So you can kind of see the sheen of the thread on these patches. This is one of my favorite patches because it's all about weaving. And, you know, this is, if any of you have been in Scouts, that's one of the things that you do in Scouts. And I was a Girl Scout when I was young, and we would learn how to do different things. And then once we accomplished the task, we would get a badge like this, and then we would put it on our sash, right? But you can also use badges, and you can sew them on like a tote bag, or you could sew them onto a denim jacket, or you could sew them onto your backpack. And then it is with you all the time. So the badges that we're going to actually make our own badge. And this is an example I have. Let's say you just had your 16th birthday party, and so you want to commemorate that. You're like, sweet 16. So whenever we get started making an art project, I like to do a couple of things. I like to have what I call a big idea. A big idea is something that all people can relate to. And the big ideas that I have for this project are celebration. If you're celebrating something like your birthday, it can be a memory. And I love going to the mountains. And so this badge is a little bit like a memory of being in the mountains and seeing the stars. Or it could also be a symbol for something. And so I have this badge that is a happy heart, which is a symbol for love and a symbol for happiness. So those are our big ideas that I want you to think about. And the documents in the drive, there's actually a complete lesson plan. So everything I'm telling you and showing you will be in that lesson plan. So you can kind of sit back and relax right now, but that information will be there for you so that you can go back and you can look at it more closely, and you can, dive in even deeper than what we're going to do today. So the other thing I like to do when we're approaching making art, and I do this for myself as well, is I ask myself a question. And some of the questions that you might think about in this lesson would be, how can a felt badge keep a memory alive? Right? So this one, wow, like I lived in Colorado, and I would go to Colorado with my family. So when I see this, even though it's super simple and it's not very complex, it immediately takes me back to those nights in the mountains when the stars were shining so bright. What kind of symbols represent your activity or experience? So you can think about, if you learn how to cook, maybe you want to put a bowl and a spoon. So you want to think about symbols that, it's like this weaving patch has a woven piece of cloth, and it symbolizes my activity of learning how to weave. And then, how do you feel when you celebrate an accomplishment or an experience? Well, this little badge, Sweet 16, this is happy. You want to think about what kind of colors you want to choose, and what kind of things that you want to think about when you're designing your badge. So that's the first thing that you're going to do, is you're going to design your badge. So what do you need to make a felt badge? Well, I have a stack of felt here, and you can get all of these supplies at Michael's or Walmart or Joann's or Hobby Lobby. These are all simple materials that are easy to get. So I have a stack of felt. I also have boxes of embroidery floss. Now remember, this is what I do for a living, so I have lots of colors to choose from, but you can just start with, 1 or 2 colors for your badge. You need to have a needle, and you want to have a needle that is sharp at the end. I don't know if you guys can see this. It's not a dull needle, it's a sharp needle, but the eye of the needle is pretty big so that you can get that heavier thread through it. And you're going to need some scissors, maybe some scissors for paper, because paper dulls scissors. So I always use my fabric scissors to cut cloth, and I use my paper scissors to cut paper. But if you don't have that, if you're going to do it just for now, that's fine. But if you do it all the time, then you want to have scissors for special duties to do. Now, also in the drive is a document that I made that has some templates so that you guys can just have a really quick jumping off point. So I have 2 templates I made. I made a circle that's about 4 inches in diameter, and I also made a triangle that is that I'm going to use. So these will help you to kind of get your symbols or your images that you want to use to make your badge. Now, if you want to do something that I haven't included in the handout, it's really easy to go to the website and look for clip art. And I actually have that up here in this template. I found a clip art site that is copyright free, which is important to know. And it also has a lot of black line clip art, because I just wanted really simple shapes. I'm going to put the detail in with my stitching. So so that's where you can go get your shapes, and you can go look for your own shapes. So what we're going to do today is I am going to make a round badge. So I'm going to cut out my 4-inch circle. with my paper scissors. And that will be my first template. And there are other ways you could make this. Maybe if you have some plastic lids for storage things, you could use those to draw a circle, or maybe a glass is the right size. You can just take something and, you know, you can put it on paper, and you can also move this so it's in the camera. If you don't have the template, you can take something and you can trace around it with a pen or a pencil, and you can make a circle that way. So there's lots of ways to make the right size circle that you want for your project. So I decided today that I also want to do the flower, but I'm gonna hold back on this for just a minute, because what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and cut out the base. So you can have two, well, this black one just has one layer of felt. That's all it is. One layer of felt and one layer of stitching. Very simple. You can see the back of it. This is a, I wanted to show you, this is somebody that inspired me. So this is all hand stitched. And I'll come back and we'll talk about this in just a minute, but there are people out there on the internet through Etsy or other shops that are selling their own hand embroidered badges that are just beautiful. And so I got one of hers. All right, so I'm going to take my circle. I've decided that I'm going to use the orange as my background, and then I want to have a second circle, and I'm going to use green where I have the purple, and then I'm going to make my flower out of the yellow. So, so that's going to be my plan. So I'm going to, now when you're cutting this out, you can also pin your template with a sewing pin. I've got a T-pin here. You could also just use a needle. And so I'm going to pin that to my felt, and I'm going to use my other scissors because that's how I roll in my studio. And I'm going to cut out my first base. And, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. One thing I like to say a lot is perfection is overrated. Sometimes we get all hung up on things being perfect, and they don't have to be perfect. Now I want a little smaller circle, so that's going to be my bottom base. So I'm going to come, and I'm just going to come in here, and I'm going to cut my circle down just a little bit. Now I'm pretty good at eyeballing, you know, what to do, but if you wanted it to be more precise, you could find something that was circular shape that would be smaller, and you could cut it down using that. But that's pretty good right there. So that's going to be my next layer, and I want that layer to be green. So I'm going to come back, and I am just going to pin that, and I'm going to cut the green layer out. So this felt that I'm working with is pretty stiff. Like, there's lots of different kinds of felt. Real true felt is sometimes made out of woolen fibers, but the stuff we get from the hobby store is usually an acrylic fiber and is pretty strong, actually. All right, so there are my two layers, my base layer and my second layer. Now I want to show you a little trick about tracing, because I want to use this flower And I want to use these lines so you can kind of see that this color, the yellow, I can see through the felt. That is super great. But sometimes when you use a darker color, you might not be able to see through the felt. But I'm going to get my phone out, and I'm going to turn my flashlight on, and I'm going to put the flashlight, and I don't know if you guys can see it. Yeah, I think you can see it. So you can actually use a light behind your pattern and your felt, and you could use a Sharpie, and you can trace out your design. And so that's what I'm going to do. But I'm going to, since we can see through the yellow, I'm not going to have to use the light. So I'm going to get my yellow out, and I'm going to use a Sharpie, a fine point Sharpie, because I don't want the line to be super heavy, because I'm going to stitch over it. So I'm just going to very lightly trace over this so it gives me the design that I want for my my shape. And I'm actually going to do all of this has a very heavy black line in it. Oh, I need to shift this up a little bit better so you can see. Sorry. Are there any questions so far, Maggie?
No questions at this time, just enjoying watching you work.
All right, excellent. So I'm just going to go in here very lightly with my fine point Sharpie. You might be able to use a pencil, but you just have to test it out, because not all drawing instruments, like sometimes pencil won't show up on felt. So you just have to do a little experimentation and find the right kind of pen that's going to draw on the right kind of felt. And you know, every time you use a different art material, you get a different result. That's what makes it so much fun to make art, because everything you do, you make a decision about, and that's what makes your art unique and special. Okay, so I've drawn my flower, and I am going to cut just the outside. I'm going to leave the inside of the flower. I just want to cut around this outside edge, and I want to go slow and do a good job. And you can see this felt is kind of stiff. It's not very floppy. It almost is like a piece of paper. I'm going to cut that whole part off so I can just go in with my scissors, not have so much felt around. So I don't know if you like to do gardening or if you like plants, but boy, that you could do a whole series of badges, and you could do a whole series of flowers. Maybe your mom or your grandma or your dad or your grandpa likes to garden. So these could also be really wonderful gifts that you could make people for the holidays, and it wouldn't cost very much, but it would be very meaningful. Okay, so I am going to take my needle, and so now I've got my two bases and I have my design. So now it's time to start the stitching. So you can, I'm going to get some little finer pins over here. So when you start stitching, you can, I'm going to use these little straight pins. And I'm just going to pin these things together so they're not going to move around. I'm just going to pin it up on one side and on the other side. So now everything is firmly attached. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the embroidery. So now it's time to embroider, and I wanted to come back to this and show you that this artist uses a variety of embroidery stitches. And this is really where, oh my gosh, you can have so much fun. You can go online and you can actually find how to embroider. You can find lots of YouTube videos. You can find websites that'll show you how to embroider. I love this little pocket guide in the lesson plan that is in the Google Drive. I have all of these resources in there for you. So just to remind you that at the end of the program, if you haven't printed out that lesson or looked at it, then you can go there. Also, I have a website, and this lesson is on my website. And the website is called explorfiber.com, explorfiber.com. And it's on the front page, so you can go right there and find it. But people have been embroidering for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Back when we, in cultures that had kings and queens, all of their fancy royal clothing was embroidered with lots of different stitches. And people would spend a lot of time, usually young women, and they would learn how to do all these different kinds of stitches, and they would practice them. So it's really fun to do. There are so many stitches, it's crazy. But we're just going to start with one stitch. We're going to start with the back stitch, and we're going to use this simple stitch just to put the center of the flower down. So the embroidery floss is very reasonably priced. So, and you can get these storage boxes. They have different sizes, and they have different cards that you wrap your embroidery floss around. I always label mine with the color and the manufacturer, so that if I need to go back and get some more of it, I know what it is. So this particular embroidery floss is called 6-strand floss. So I'm going to pull some off, and I made just a length about this long. You don't want it to be too long. You want it, it's like Goldilocks. You don't want it too long or too short. You want it to be just right. So you have to practice and figure out. But mine is, about as like I've got my arms spread apart. But you'll see here that there's actually 6 little threads in this embroidery floss. So I'm going to divide it. I decided I want to embroider with 3 threads at a time. You could do 2 threads at a time. You can embroider with all 6 threads if you want. It just depends. That's just an artistic decision that you make. And so when you're separating this thread, you want to hold on at one end, and you want to sort of pull down because you're unspinning the thread, and it can get a little bit knotted, but if you just keep holding on the tension, then you get to the end and it's all good. Okay, so I've got my 3 threads. I chose this yarn because I want to pick up the orange from the outside. This is a variegated yarn, so you can see that it has all yellows and oranges and several shades in between. It's called variegated, and I think that's going to look nice. So I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to thread my needle with the 3 strands of floss. And then I'm gonna tie a knot. And what I do is I wrap the thread around my finger and I roll it, and then I bring my other finger at the top of that roll and I pull down with my fingernail, and it makes a knot. But again, there's videos out there to teach you everything. Go to YouTube. It'll show you how to knot your thread. It'll show you things I won't even have time to show you today. Okay, so here we go. So I'm gonna start in the center circle, and I'm gonna use the back stitch to just define that circle. So you always want your knots and when you end to be on the back side of your thread. So I'm going to put the needle through that on that line. Sometimes you have to stab around, like, and you're like, nope, that's too far. That's not on the line. I don't know if you can see that, but you just stab around until you line your needle point up with your with the felt, and then I'm just gonna go up and down. So I'm gonna make a stitch, and it's gonna be a little bit short. Now here's the back stitch. I'm gonna come and in my instructions, it shows that the needle is doing this, but my felt is pretty thick, and so I'm just going to go up and down because my needle can't quite do that. So here's another thing. It's like when you look at instructions, that's just a recommendation. Sometimes you have to modify the instructions to fit your own situation. So I'm modifying the back stitch so that I am just going up through from the bottom and down from the top. And the practice is trying to make your stitches as even as possible. So you're observing what you're doing. You're, you know, and if you think it's way off, then you can take it out. So let's just see what happens when you do that. So I'm like, oh, you know, that stitch is too long. How can I take that out? I'm going to take my needle and I'm just going to take the thread out of the needle, and I'm going to just go backwards. I'm going to pull the stitch out from the front, and then I'm going to pull it out from the back, and then I'm going to rethread. I usually, if you lick your thread and make it a little moist, then it'll all come together and it'll go into your needle, the eye of your needle better. So I'm just going to go up and down, and I'm going to go around the circle. So some of the needles, and there's so many kinds of needles out there, it can be really confusing. There's a kind of needle called a tapestry needle, but a tapestry needle is got a blunt end. It's not sharp at all. And that can be an advantage when you're weaving with yarn or doing some kind of fiber techniques. You don't want a sharp end on your needle. But for any embroidery job, you want a sharp needle because it's taking a little bit of effort for me to go through all 3 layers of this particular felt, because this particular felt is kind of thick and it's kind of stiff. So I am making it work for myself here. Now, I don't know who all is in the audience, but if you have some young children, or maybe you just don't even have, maybe all you have is felt, you don't have any embroidery floss, you can actually make a badge without embroidering. And I'm just going to show that to you real quick so you know that you have another option. And you can just cut out, oh, I can hear my kitty meowing to come in, but he's staying out for right now. So I'm just going to cut out another quickly little circle and show you how you can make a badge without embroidering. Now, in the lesson that I've listed, some extensions or some extra things that you can do with this project is you can put something on the back that would allow you to iron it on something, and using a product like Wonder Under or some other product like that. So you can find more information about that in the lesson. Now, the other thing I want you to know is that these badges are not really waterproof. So you can't sew these on to a garment and then, throw it in the washing machine. So you would have to, if you make a badge, you really want to put it on something that's not going to be washed, like a backpack or like a tote bag. So here's the other thing you can do is that if you don't have the embroidery floss, all you need is scissors and felt, and you need some glue. Now, I couldn't find my Elmer's glue this morning, but this is another white glue, but you can use any kind of school glue. Elmer's, I like Aileen's tacky glue. It's a little stronger than Elmer's. And so if you have a younger person or you don't have these materials, you can actually just glue these parts together. And then you could go and stitch them. And I'll just put, now I'm going to show you, so I put the glue on kind of all over, but I'm going to really very carefully, you know how when you put too much glue, that when you press it down, it'll squirt out the edges. So I'm going to be pretty careful about my edges, but I want the glue to go to the edge for this project. So I've got the glue on the back, and then I'm going to position it where I want it and press down. And actually what would be really good is like to put a book on there and let the book weight it down until it dries. So any questions at this point? Maggie, anybody, anything come up?
Yeah, wondering, do you have a favorite embroidery stitch you like to use?
Well, I'm going to show you another project I did, which is a book. And actually, this is a lesson I'm going to be writing up soon. And it also just uses felt and embroidery floss and, scissors. And so I really like to play with a lot of different embroidery stitches. I love to outline things with my embroidery stitches. And then sometimes you can make these little French knots, which are very decorative. I made this during the pandemic, when we've all been locked down, and you know, in the beginning I was counting the days, and then as time goes on, it's like, wow, you don't even know what day it is sometimes. It's so you just lost track of, uh, of time. This is a spiral. Is this one of my favorite symbols because spiral is like the dance of life. It has lots of meaning. Um, and then I actually did some little weaving. I made long stitches one way, and then I came up with my embroidery thread and wove over, under to make these little weavings and made this squiggly line. And then this one I used a satin stitch for this. I used a chain stitch for this and a big loopy chain stitch for the flower. So, but I love kind of weaving with the thread as well. I think that makes it really fun for me. Any other questions? Oh, I see someone says that's way too difficult for you. Actually, all you need to do is just to practice a little bit, and you don't have to, you'd be surprised at how easy. The way I put these felt pages together on the back of the book was I just did a cross stitch, just an X stitch down the middle of everything so that they were connected. And then I used a stitch called the blanket stitch to attach the pages together so you wouldn't see the back side where it's kind of messy. But you know, I started when I was a little kid and I've been doing it ever since. So, you know, it's a lot of fun, and it can be very calming and relaxing when you are stitching with needle and thread. So just as a review, these are the patches that I made for our lesson. And I did want to say that in the lesson that you can print out, or you can find this lesson, remember, on explorefiber.com. It's on the home page. It says new felt badges. It's right up at the top. But I show you a way to use your template and to stitch through the paper, like to do letters, and then to very carefully tear the paper away. Now, when I did these letters for Sweet 16, I just eyeballed it. They're not perfect, and that's okay. You know, I just kind of went and put one color down, but you know, I could pick this apart and say, well, that's not right, that's not right. But that didn't matter because overall it looks really good, and I like to see evidence of the maker in a piece. You know, that's, I think, really important to understand, is that, you know, these are great. These machine embroidered patches, they're beautiful, and they're meant to be washed, and they're meant to be really strong and sturdy, but they don't look handmade. So I think there's a lot of value and a lot of magic when you actually put your own life energy into it and your own expression, and I think that makes it really beautiful as well.
When you separate out the threads of your floss, is it to determine the width of your stitch?
Yes.
Is it harder to keep it at those 6 threads, or what is your process for picking out how many threads you use?
Well, let me just give you a quick demo and show you. Usually when you're embroidering, you're using 2 to 3 threads. But if you wanted to have a heavy line, then you could use all 6 threads. And I'll just show you what that looks like in comparison to the 3 threads. So I'm just going to thread my needle with all 6 threads. That was a good question, Maggie. And I'm going to tie a knot, and we'll just do it on this flower, and I'll do it right. I'll do the outside circle. Going up and down. And I don't know if the camera can pick this up because of the color I got to the yellow part, so it's not as contrasting as the orange is. But I'll do one more stitch and we'll hold it up to the camera so you can see. So it really, it makes a heavier line, and it makes it a little bit more textural. Can you see the difference?
Yes, we do. It's a little thicker, and it also has a little bit more height to it, it looks like.
Absolutely. And the other thing you would, if you used more strands, you might have to make your stitches a little longer to sort of accommodate that heavier thread. So you would just, listen, one of the things I used to say in my art classroom all the time, because my students were very concerned about, whether they were doing something correctly. And what is wonderful about any creative expression, there's no right or wrong to it. It's just you can do it this way or you could do it that way. And as the artist, you're making each and every decision to decide how you want to use color, how you want to use texture, and how you want to use different stitches. So in this hand embroidered piece, you can see that, and it's beautifully embroidered. Man, her embroidery is better than my embroidery for sure. But, she uses the stitches, and she makes these stitches go around in a circle. So she uses the stitches to follow the line and the movement that she wants to have in her piece. So each one of those things is a decision that she makes. And then she outlined her little leaves with a darker color just for emphasis. And that really makes a big difference in her design, just that little detail of outlining the leaves. Okay, anything else? I know we're coming to the end of our time.
Yes, we are. So if you have any last minute questions, feel free to add those in the chat. But I want to thank you all for joining us today, and a big thank you for Christine for showing us this really cool project that you could do easily at home with your family. And you have had exhibits recently, Christine?
I have. In fact, I have another website that is my own personal art website. It's called christinekmiller.com. And I invite you to go look at the work that I've done. It has the towels that I weave. My husband and I did an exhibit that's was like an underwater coral reef, and I did all the fiber sculpture, and he did the resin paintings. And so we just took it down the end of September. It was at the Art Center of Plano, and making art is my life. It's been I've been a fiber artist my whole life. I'm so lucky that I found what I love at an early age, and I never stopped exploring what I could do with fiber. But Maggie and Rachel's, I just want to thank you for doing something different this time and actually coming into my studio. I think that it's just been really special for me to be able to share with you my work environment, and so that everyone that has attended can see, you know, an artist studio and see where the magic happens.
Well, thank you for letting us come to you. It's been really cool to see your workspace and see all your different projects that you work on.
Good, and I see the note about the embroidery steam kit. That looks awesome. So I hope you guys take advantage of that through the library, because that will help you get down the road. And I hope you do some embroidery, and if you do something and you go to my site, christinekmiller.com, I would love to see what you do. You can contact me and email me and share what you do. I would, you know, I'm an art teacher and I like to see what my students produce. So feel free to share.
Awesome. Again, thank you all for joining us today. We are going to wrap this up in just about a minute. So again, thank you, and check out planolibrary.org for all of our upcoming virtual activities.